He could buy anything: private jets, islands, even silence in a courtroom. But the one thing billionaire Ethan Caldwell couldn't buy was his daughter's voice. And just when he gave up hope, 3 ordinary boys from a forgotten neighborhood did the impossible without asking for a dime. Ethan Caldwell stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, staring blankly at the skyline that had once thrilled him. Manhattan glittered below, a city of ambition and noise, but inside, the world was quiet, too quiet. Behind him, his 6-year-old daughter, Leela, sat cross-legged on the polished hardwood floor, gently brushing the hair of her favorite stuffed bunny. She didn't make a sound. She never had. She had been born mute. The doctors called it a neurological anomaly. No damage, no trauma, just silence. Ethan had flown in the world's best specialists, built therapy rooms that looked like science fiction sets, and even sponsored an entire research program dedicated to pediatric speech disorders. Nothing worked. Nothing helped. Leela remained trapped in her soundless world, and Ethan, once the golden boy of Silicon Valley, the man who built an empire with sheer will, was powerless. He watched her now, his heart aching as he saw her lips move in small, silent patterns while she played pretend tea party. She'd do this for hours. No television, no music, just her and her bunny, whispering words no one else could hear. Every now and then she would glance at him with those wide, thoughtful eyes. He'd smile and wave. She'd smile back, and then return to her silence. Ethan turned away from the window and sat down on the edge of the couch. He buried his face in his hands. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He could negotiate billion-dollar deals and predict global markets, but he couldn't reach his own daughter. He couldn't hear her say his name. He had never wanted a big life, just a meaningful one, but somehow, he'd lost track of that. Now, all the money in the world sat in his accounts, and the only thing he prayed for was a single word: Daddy, just once. Even a whisper. He looked up again, and Leela was now looking directly at him, her head tilted, curious, almost as if she could feel the weight in his chest. She waved again, a tiny, open-handed gesture of love. Ethan smiled, swallowing the lump in his throat. He waved back. Then the silence returned, and in that silence he whispered a promise to himself: there has to be a way. I just haven't found it yet. The following Saturday, Ethan's driver, Robert, suggested a change of scenery. There's a quiet park, just outside the city. Might be good for Leela, he said gently, knowing how hard things had been. Ethan hesitated. Routine was Leela's comfort zone, but something in him said yes. They needed air, something different, anything. The park was modest, nestled in a quieter part of the Bronx. No fancy playgrounds or fountains, just a few rusty swings, a patchy soccer field, and kids running barefoot on cracked pavement. Ethan stood back near the car, watching as Leela cautiously approached the swings. She was still hugging her bunny. She didn't speak, but she didn't seem afraid either. She sat down and gently rocked herself back and forth. Then, 3 boys showed up. They looked around 10 or 11. One had a soccer ball tucked under his arm, another was eating a melted popsicle, and the smallest of them had a scuffed-up hearing aid behind his left ear. Ethan tensed. He prepared himself to intervene, just in case. He was used to people not understanding Leela, sometimes even mocking her silence. But the boys didn't laugh. They didn't stare. Instead, they smiled, to Ethan's surprise. The smallest one walked over to Leela and, without saying a word, began signing with his hands. Simple, clear signs. Leela froze. She blinked. Then her small fingers slowly moved in response. Ethan's eyes widened. She was signing back. The other 2 boys joined in, all 3 now signing rapidly, excitedly, laughing without sound. Leela's face lit up, not just a smile, joy, the kind Ethan hadn't seen in years. She giggled, then clapped her hands, then gestured again. The boys clapped too, nodding, encouraging her. Ethan couldn't move. He felt something rise in his chest, tight and unfamiliar. His daughter was communicating, not just mimicking signs from a therapist, but connecting, laughing, belonging. He walked slowly toward them, not wanting to break the moment. The boys looked up politely. One waved. She's smart. The boy with the hearing aid signed and said out loud, she just needed a friend. Ethan swallowed hard. His voice cracked as he managed to say, thank you. The boy smiled again. Anytime, mister, we just like helping. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. The image of Leela laughing with those boys, so free, so present, played in his mind on a loop. He kept thinking about the way her tiny hands moved, her eyes lighting up with every gesture, every sign. He had seen breakthroughs before, small ones, clinical ones, but this had been something else, real, human. It was as if she had been waiting all along for someone to speak her language, not teach her theirs. The next day, Ethan asked Robert to drive him back to the park. Lila sat in the back seat with her bunny, hopeful. The boys were there again, playing near the same swings. When they spotted her, they ran over like old friends. No hesitation, no awkwardness, just joy. Ethan got out and approached slowly, this time not staying in the background. He knelt beside the boys and asked where they had learned to sign. The boy with the hearing aid, his name was Jamal, shrugged. Our friend Marcus was deaf. He moved last year. We didn't want him to feel left out, so we all learned sign language together, Jamal explained. We still use it, even though he moved. It's kind of our secret language now. Ethan stared at the three boys, stunned not just by their kindness, but by their quiet humility. They hadn't learned signing for praise or credit, they did it out of love, out of friendship. And now, without even realizing it, they were giving his daughter something no therapist, no expensive clinic ever had: a reason to communicate, a reason to try. Over the next few weeks, Ethan brought Lila to the park every afternoon. The boys Jamal, Eli, and Carlos welcomed her like a little sister. They taught her games, showed her new signs, and most importantly, made her feel normal. Ethan often sat on a nearby bench, watching in silence, his heart both aching and swelling with each visit. She was blossoming in front of his eyes. No more clinging to the bunny, no more hiding behind him. She ran, she laughed, she signed fluently. Then one day, while playing a word game with the boys, Lila paused. She looked toward Ethan, who was sitting with a book on the bench, and signed something quickly to the boys. They all turned and smiled at him. Before Ethan could even raise an eyebrow, Lila ran over. She stopped in front of him, standing tall and proud. Her eyes sparkled, and then she spoke. Daddy was quiet, a little breathy, imperfect, but unmistakable. Ethan dropped the book. His hands flew to his mouth as tears filled his eyes. Lila, he whispered. She smiled and signed. At the same time, Daddy, I love you. He couldn't hold it in anymore. He knelt down and wrapped her in his arms, sobbing into her hair, overcome by the miracle he'd just witnessed. Not a miracle born of money or medicine, but of kindness, of connection, of three young boys who had given his daughter not just a voice but the courage to use it. 6 months later, the community center where Jamal, Eli, and Carlos had learned sign language looked completely different. The cracked paint was gone, the broken windows replaced, and a new playground stood outside. Inside, bright murals covered the walls, images of hands, signing words like hope, friendship, and love. A sign above the door read, "The Lila Caldwell Center for Inclusive Communication." Ethan had poured his heart into this place, not out of guilt, but out of gratitude. The boys had changed Lila's world, and now he wanted to help change others. He didn't just write a check, he showed up, every week, sometimes just to sit quietly and watch the lessons, other times, to share Lila's story with families who had nearly given up. Jamal, Eli, and Carlos became the youngest mentors in the program. They stood proudly at the front of the room during the grand opening, wearing matching shirts that read, "Kindness speaks louder." Lila stood between them, holding their hands. She wore a tiny hearing aid. Now her speech was still developing, but her confidence was radiant. Ethan stepped up to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out over the crowd. Parents, teachers, therapists, and children filled the room. He took a deep breath. A few months ago, he began, voice thick with emotion. I thought I had tried everything to help my daughter. I thought money could fix what was broken, but it wasn't experts who reached her, it was these three boys. He turned to them, eyes wet. They didn't do it for recognition. They did it because they cared. Because they understood something I had forgotten. Real connection doesn't come from power or privilege, it comes from love. The audience erupted in applause. Lila clapped too, then leaned toward the mic. With a brave little voice, she whispered, "Thank you." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. As the ceremony ended and children flooded the new center, Ethan stood with the boys, watching it all unfold. For the first time in years, his heart felt full. He smiled and said quietly, "You boys didn't just teach my daughter to speak. You taught me how to listen." And the world, at last, felt right.